Good evening, folks, all my listening friends, and welcome back. This is Robert Vaughn, Alex Jewell with the DeFi Collective, where we cover all things associated with decentralized finance. We cover blockchain, we cover Bitcoin, we cover smart contracts, we cover liquidity pools, we cover anything that's associated with blockchain and decentralized finance. And today we have a lot of times we're technical in what we talk about. And we try to stay up to date on, latest with Meta and with, NFTs and what is this and what is that. But today we're going to do something a little different. We're going to talk about some of the practical implications of blockchain and Bitcoin. We talk a lot about the nature. Today we're going to kind of focus on the significance and what it means, because most people, when you say Bitcoin, they'll say, well, where should I buy it? How much did you make? Buy the dip, sell it high, But the whole blockchain thing is there's much more to it than just Bitcoin. And there's much more to Bitcoin than just buying a dip. So today we want to talk about some of the more practical aspects. And we want to talk about a country you may have heard of, El Salvador. El Salvador's president, Nayib Bukele. Bukele, did I pronounce that right, Alex? Bukele?
It's one of those, yeah.
Yeah. It's one of those. Nayib Bukele, the president, he's been president since 2019. El Salvador is the first country to adopt crypto as a currency alongside the US dollar. And as you well know, the US dollar is sort of the default currency of all the countries in the world. Everybody wants dollars. China likes to have their own country, but if you want to pay them in rubles, they probably say we prefer dollars or euros. Preferably dollars. So dollar is a default currency because it's remained strong. And that's why people from all over the world, buy real estate. That's why, a house, I was talking to somebody in Sausalito, California, makes 250 grand a year and they can't afford a house. Because a 2-bedroom house is like 2.2 million bucks,
Yep.
Which is pretty sad because people from all around the world buy property to store their money. Because United States real estate is a great way to store your money and to get appreciation on your money. I mean, if you're an NBA player or a professional football player and you get your signing advance in Bitcoin and you take that and use it to buy a house, say in Southern California for 10 million. Well, the time your next contract is up 3 or 4 years, that 10 million now is probably a 16 or 17 million dollar house.
And so you get tax credits for buying property.
Yeah, and he gets tax credits, So the US dollar is sort of the default currency of the world. And one of the things that El Salvador has done is they've kind of, they kind of shaken up the apple cart, so to speak. They've kind of shaken things up because, Gaddafi wanted to have his own currency, and we all know how that turned out. That didn't turn out too good. He wanted the currency. They want to go back to the gold standard and use the dinar as a currency for Africa. And I think he wasn't around 6 months later. So this is groundbreaking, I guess, or earth-shattering, so to speak. But El Salvador, being the first country to adopt crypto as a currency alongside the US dollar, didn't go over very well with the major banks, the Bank of England, the Bank of the Netherlands, the German bank, the Bank of Japan, the United States Fed. The banks really weren't too keen on this because what's going to happen is other countries will probably take note, and there are going to be some benefits to doing this, and it's a great experiment, I think. But the Bank of England is really pissed off at El Salvador now.
Well, yeah, they're sort of in a somewhat of a screaming match at this point where he's taunting them over Twitter.
Yeah. So Alex, go ahead and talk about that a little bit and what role Bitcoin is playing in here.
Yeah. So, this is a lot of these things are really complex situations. They're not everything is what it looks like on the surface. And so it's important that you kind of take a look at some of the underlying details of what's actually happening here. A lot of things in the global stage are often performative. They're based around obviously maintaining power and wealth on both sides of disagreements like this. So you have somebody like Bukele, who is actually kind of authoritarian at this point. He's like not actually so much for freedom. In fact, since he took office, despite a lot of his promises and high ratings, journalists are being monitored. You have a regression in civil liberties and rights that people are very worried about. He's passing foreign agent legislation, or trying to. They also had an automatic re-election of him, which is suspicious. Cool. So why would Bukele be on the surface creating this beautiful Bitcoin city, power to the people, and this whole message of freedom, right? It creates some contradictory feelings, right? Because the concept is actually really cool, and there's really great ideas at play. I'm sure there's some good teams working around it. I think it remains to be seen a couple of things. One is, I mean, do they actually pull it off? It's one thing to say, I'm going to build a brand new city with a Bitcoin symbol city center, and it's going to be run on geothermal energy from a volcano so that it's green energy. And I'm going to cut all the taxes because we're going to earn all these rewards on mining Bitcoin, using the geothermal energy and running our networks so that everything runs on cryptocurrency and becomes super efficient. And it sounds like a crypto dream, right? Of something that we talk about a lot. But you see how especially more authoritarian right-leaning leaders have often done, is they'll create these beautiful cities out of performance, right? You look at, Myanmar, they have a city, it's called like Naypyidaw or something. And, they have it's like a 50-lane highway, and most of the country is living in mud still, right? So they have this like 50-lane highway leading into this brand new, beautiful city. As soon as they opened it up to the world and said, look how great we are. And they like welcomed in some media to take pictures of their beautiful new capital. And that's cool and everything, but like, it's very much a symbol, right? Just like in North Korea, when you look at Pyongyang, you have a bunch of really beautiful statues and hotels and things, and they don't even have electricity half the time. They're empty because most people in the country don't have this. That city's not for them, right? So authoritarians will create symbols to their own ego, right? And I think what I want to still see is like, is this Bitcoin city actually going to be what it's promised for the reason that it's promised for? And if so, that's great. I just still don't agree with some of his leadership, but that's still like really cool to see it happen. But if not, then we're seeing kind of history repeat itself in terms of, building beautiful, great cities with money that you could have probably used to actually help people in the interim, and it doesn't end up helping people at all, and it probably doesn't actually produce the returns that it's promised to, and it doesn't succeed. And then you just have a monument to your leader who's dismantled democracy behind the scenes while this was in the forefront, right?
And if he is serious about blockchain and Bitcoin, and have a city that's dedicated, a Bitcoin city. He just had Bitcoin Week, which is a big celebration about what he's going to do. And this is a guy that he's sort of an unconventional, center right, he calls himself. He wears a baseball cap on backwards, and he wears a shirt with no tie out of his pants, and he usually wears blue jeans or khakis. So he's kind of
this is his Twitter picture.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah.
This is the president.
That's the president, yeah.
He calls himself the CEO of El Salvador.
Yeah, the CEO, of El Salvador, yeah. So he's sort of a different type of guy, and what he wants to have in El Salvador is he wants to have a country funded by Bitcoin. Funded by Bitcoin-backed bonds that uses geothermal energy to mine Bitcoin, so you wouldn't use up, energy, and you wouldn't. It's green energy, so that's a good thing, and it
Right.
would be a tax-free haven for people to come invest. He says, come and invest all the money you want, and you won't have to pay a dime in taxes on it.
Right. He wants to
That's
use the VATs instead.
Yeah, yeah. Now that's a pretty attractive. If I've got a few hundred million sitting around, I might send 20 or 30 million just to check it out. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And I
Right.
think that's what he's counting on, because I guess there's 1 billion in bonds he's doing in partnership with Blockstream.
Mhm.
Half of the bond money will go to infrastructure, and half will be locked up for 5 years when in Bitcoin, and it could be sold after that, with the return on investment being split 50-50 between the government and investors.
Right.
Now, if you look at Bitcoin historically, it's done about 200% a year.
Mhm.
So in 5 years, should be worth 10 times what it's worth now.
Right.
So say if it was 50 grand that he locked up, and in 10 years, that's 500 grand, and the state gets 250 and the investors get 250. And I'd say, I don't know anybody that would take that deal
Right.
based on historical performance of Bitcoin. In 5 years, you'll have 10 times your money.
Yep.
I'd hock everything right now if I was kind of, I'd sell a house and do it if I thought that was really, and
Yeah.
it could happen, and then maybe it won't happen. It just depends.
Yeah, it's very interesting. They had some technical difficulties rolling out Bitcoin initially, but now in McDonald's and El Salvador, you can use Bitcoin to buy food, and
McDonald's, how about that, man?
And Blockstream, his partnership with Blockstream is really interesting because Blockstream is a very effective company. Essentially, what's being built on Bitcoin are these layer 2 solutions, because Bitcoin itself is not a currency. It really shouldn't be treated like a currency because it's slow. It's not scalable. It's like 4 transactions a second. It's not, when you have Visa pushing 7,500,000 transactions a second and Bitcoin's doing 4, that's not super great. And so how do you scale
real
that?
Quick, Alex, for those that aren't familiar with layer 2 solutions, which is sort of will you explain it? It's on top of Bitcoin. It's like smart contracts or something. Explain.
Right. Yeah. So Bitcoin is proof of work, right? We've talked about that before, where every time a transaction needs to be verified using the consensus mechanism, in this case, the consensus mechanism is called proof of work. That is the process of verifying the transaction. And the way that it works is every miner in the network competes to solve this complex mathematical equation first. And that's what makes it so secure, is that every miner is competing to solve the same problem. And the first one to do it gets the block reward, right? So that's how it works, but that's very slow. It's not super scalable if you want to have everyday exchange on that. That's not an everyday exchange type of system. That's a slowly mining gold out of a mountain system. And so, what you can do is you can build different types of infrastructure technologically on top of that system. So that's
hence the name layer 2. Yeah. Okay.
Right. So let's say, there's a couple layer 2 solutions that are most popular. One is called Lightning Network, which is really where a lot of development's happening. And then you have block streams, which is called Liquid. And Liquid is what El Salvador is going to be using for their Bitcoin city. And Liquid uses what are known as side chains. So the way side chains work is, instead of having to verify across the entire main net of Bitcoin, the main network, you're only verifying in a side chain. The side chain then connects, it's sort of like branches on a tree, right? So you have the main network, and then you might have a bunch of small branches. Your verification only has to happen on a small branch. That's your ecosystem, and that communicates with the main network. So the main network verifies the branch verifies the main network, but you don't have to do each transaction across the whole network. Okay. So
somebody's basically vouching, saying this side chain is legit. And I'll stand behind the side chain and guarantee that it will verify across the network.
It does that. Yeah, it's
That's
not even like a trust thing. It just does it through sort of like a meta. It's like meta information kind of. So like it stores meta information that represents confirmations of the whole side chain, and then those confirmations of the side chain are then verified by the main network, and vice versa. So it's connected to the main network, but they can work independently.
It's a lot faster.
Right. And that makes it a lot faster because then you're only verifying across your side chain as opposed, and this is how Polkadot works too. So, Polkadot, which is like more of it's another cryptocurrency not built. It's not even a layer 2 solution. Polkadot is its own solution. But they use side chains as part of that solution to make it more scalable and fast.
Okay. All right. Now, this brings us to my next point. The Bank of England is not too crazy about this idea.
Right.
and just, the Bank of England is one of the banking system. Most countries have a banking system. In the United States, it's the Fed. In England, it's the Bank of England. There's a Bank of Switzerland. There's a Bank of France. There's a Bank of Japan. And various other banks. France has its own bank. And all these banks really exist to ensure that the currency from that country is liquid. If a dollar equals X amount of Bitcoin, the dollar equals X amount of Bitcoin. And what happens is the banking systems of the world work together, and they have this network for verifying funds, for transferring money. So they got this thing kind of worked out, even with, Russia. I guess Russia kind of used to be a part of the banking system, but they kind of got their own thing now. Is that what it is? I know China has their own bank too, which is kind of not interconnected with everybody else because most of the currencies in the banking systems float. And what that means is that, they'll say, well, I think, a dollar's worth 1.6 euros, and everybody will say, yeah, a dollar's worth 1.6 euros. And a euro is worth 14.8 yen or whatever. And they say, okay, we agree. So there's agreement, and the currencies kind of float against each other. So you always know what you're getting. You always know what it's worth. Whereas with China, a lot of times China will, they'll just take their currency and they devalue their currency. And when you devalue your currency, that gives you an advantage in international finance, because you can buy things with a cheaper currency, you get a more valuable currency because people like dollars because you can take dollars and spend them everywhere. If Alex says, hey, Bob, I want to buy your truck you're selling, but I got some rupees or ruples. I got some ruples, some Russian. They're great. Putin says they're great. They're just as good as the dollar. And I'd probably say, you got any dollars, man? You got any American dollars? And that's what anybody around the world would say. So the Bank of England is one of those banks. And the Bank of England was sort of the original bank that sort of started the whole gold standard thing and all that. So they're the oldest and the most entrenched of the bank. And just for your information, the Federal Reserve Bank is a private corporation. It's not owned by the government. And most of the Federal Reserve governors come from the UK.
Yep.
So the Bank of England has a lot of influence outside of just the size of the country, when it comes to international banking. Now, so when the Bank of England says, I don't think this is a good idea, that the Bank of Japan says, nah, it's not a good idea. The Bank of Switzerland, nah, it's not a good idea. But, what they don't like about it is that, with Bitcoin, it takes the middleman out.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? You don't need a bank. If you're one of the, 4.5 billion people in the world that are unbanked, that don't have bank accounts, in some countries, they use Bitcoin already. In Nigeria, a lot of transactions, in Nigeria and many other countries are done on your cell phone with Bitcoin.
Right.
Because you don't have to have a bank account to borrow money, to do transactions, to pay somebody, to accept funds. so it's already being used, but I think El Salvador is the first time that a whole country says, hey, we're going to make this legit within our country. And you can go to Starbucks and you can buy a coffee with Bitcoin. You can do this with Bitcoin, and it's going to be just like a dollar. This kind of is upsetting the system that's in place. And that's why I think the last person to try this was Muammar Gaddafi. He wanted to have a currency based on the dinar that was backed by gold in Africa. And the African National Union, I think it's called, that's headquartered in Ethiopia. They had some meetings, and they said, well,
and they mainly exist because of oil, really. But they're
yeah, they mainly exist because of oil,
Yep.
And also the reason for every war in the past 150 years is usually about traceable to oil. When people say they want land, and they don't want land, this desert, and keep that. We want land that has a lot of oil, like Kuwait and Iraq and so on and so forth, but so this is not it's not something that's going to happen very easily, and I think El Salvador will get a lot of pushback. But see, the thing about Bitcoin is that no one country can really control it.
Right.
And I think this is where a lot of the banking systems have a problem with it.
Well, vocally, it's where a lot of banking systems are vocally against it, right? Vocally. Because behind the scenes, here's the power of what the vision is. Something like Liquid Network creates the possibility to wrap assets. You're essentially creating digital assets out of anything that you want to exchange, and it's immediately liquid and transferable without any middlemen. That's really powerful, right? And so when people attack Bitcoin as a currency, they're right, but they're wrong about why they're right. They're right because Bitcoin itself is not a currency. You shouldn't really be using pure Bitcoin at a coffee shop to buy a coffee, because it is something that fluctuates just like gold, right? And I think this is where there's kind of a disconnect. I think a lot of people in traditional finance don't understand this necessarily from an economic standpoint. And if they do, they're trying to build the same thing on private blockchains so that they can control it. Now, Bitcoin as a gold standard, as a standard commodity, right, that can actually stabilize currency, is very powerful. And they definitely understand that because, like you mentioned, banks like Bank of England kind of established those types of economics a long time ago. So, they understand commodity.
They also, not to interrupt you, but Bank of England, I checked today, they also have a Bitcoin department.
Of course they do. Yeah, all the banks, they're all working on this stuff. So they understand the ability to wrap assets as digital assets and carry them using blockchain technology. I think they're just intentionally being ignorant to make statements about it because they don't want countries or people individually using public blockchain. They want them eventually to use their own distributed digital assets that the banks and governments are going to be issuing themselves, right? Again, centralizing and privatizing, but using the technology that's really powerful for themselves. And this is where it's really concerning, right? And where it's actually, Bukele's responses have been really on point, because it's not like none of their critiques make sense. When you critique their main critique, one of them has, of course, been money laundering. All of these banks pay billions of dollars a year in fines as the cost of doing business because they are havens for fraud and for money laundering. Everybody is money laundering whatever currency there is. You have tons of laundering happening because crime exists in the world and criminals will find ways to move money around.
And people launder money, which I was made aware of, and I don't know how I kind of missed this, when they buy and sell art.
Oh yeah, arts.
Alex, I've got this pen here, and it's worth $100 million.
Yeah, and then we go on record, and now that pen's worth $100 million.
Yeah, I'll give it to you for 80 million, and then maybe I buy it back,
exactly.
for 78 million, and you just laundered 78 million bucks.
And if you get it valued at $100 million and then sell to me for 80 million, you took a loss and you don't pay taxes.
That's right.
So
if you think people are crazy paying $160 million for a piece of art, they're probably not as crazy as you think they are.
So the critique there is totally, it's not a problem that's specific to cryptocurrency. In fact, with blockchain, it's more visible. You can go through NFT sales and immediately spot people who are sending arts back and forth to themselves at a loss for tax reasons, for money laundering. There's like entire illegal crypto casinos that you can trace the funds all the way to their central wallets, and then all the way to when they pay themselves, and then when they buy NFTs with it to wash the money and then sell the NFTs at a loss. Like, all of this is visible on blockchain, and it's not visible in the traditional finance world as much, because if you have suitcases of cash, good luck tracing the in-between, right? And so that critique's unwarranted. And then of course, the other critique is volatility, right? They're like, I wonder if El Salvadorians realize how volatile these currencies are. It's unfair to the El Salvadorians. And it's like, where were they when El Salvadorians were dealing with civil war and like all of these other things that these Western worlds were directly funding, right? They don't care about individual El Salvadorians, and they're being in specifically,
they're probably not the ones that are going to invest the 500 million, I would imagine.
No, and they're being ignorant, of course, of the fact that there's wrapped stable coins on Liquid Network where people can use stable coins that aren't going to fluctuate in cost, right? So that, I mean, so it's pretty wild that these banks have something to say about it when all of them are participating in cryptocurrency, moving billions of dollars to crypto assets themselves, and then they're attacking this publicly. I mean, that's
well, I think one reason I think they attack it publicly is because they haven't quite got a handle on it, how they can corner the market and have the same advantages that they have now with fiat currency. And I think where most of them have come to the conclusion that because it is so transparent and everything done on a blockchain ledger is there for everyone to see, that they're probably not going to be able to do what they do now in terms of the way that they transact money. I had a kid. I had a kid. One of my nephews, a friend of his, I guess he must be 9 or 10. They're studying, things that they study banking system in school. So he said, "Well, who makes the money from the World Bank? The world?" And I was like, he's asking me all these questions about economics. He said, "Well, what is this? What is that?" So I tell him, They say, "Well, where's the money go from the World Bank?" They say they get interest on their money. Like if I loan Fred $10 and he has to pay me back 12, then I make the $2. He said, "Who makes money on the interest of the World Bank?" I was like, "I don't know, man. But I'm sure somebody does."
Yeah, somebody makes a lot of money from the World Bank.
That's right. Somebody makes a lot of money, and I'm sure they want to keep on making that money. So something like blockchain and Bitcoin that's going to increase transparency might not be in everyone's best interest.
Yeah. There's two options for the future, right? Both of them include blockchain. The one option is that we end up with private blockchains and privately issued stable coins and contextual currencies, digital currencies that are issued by corporations, banks, governments. That is one option. And that's the unfortunate option if we end up in that direction, because then it's no longer a technology that belongs to people. It's no longer technology that can be democratized. It's controlled and regulated.
Oh, I got email today, man. I can get a great deal on the Amazon cryptocurrency that's coming out, So it's what you're talking about is happening already.
Yep. Yeah. They all want to issue
such a good deal. It's probably a good deal for Bezos. Probably not such a good deal for me. No.
They all want to issue social currencies and contextual currencies. They all want to do it. The question is, can we preserve the public blockchains that we own, right? And I think that's sort of what we have to fight for. Just like net neutrality, I think this is really similar in nature, but it's not as obvious or as visible. Net neutrality was a big thing to people because we had already been using the internet for so long that people were like, wait, I'm going to have to pay to like visit certain websites, or like I'm only going to be able to visit some websites. And they were like, that upset people a lot, obviously, because the freedom of the internet created the real innovation, and it created access, right? Everybody can access on the internet. Not everybody has internet access in the world, which is something we need to work on, but everybody with internet access can access, unless you're in a country like, like China. But most people in the Western world on internet access can learn anything that they want, or, like you're learning Python right now, like you can go online and you can do these things. And that's the beauty of a free internet. And if we lose that with crypto, we lose that next ecosystem having the same access and liberty that it should have. And I think that's what we have to be really aware of when these banks attack things, because that's really the real agenda, right? Is they want to own it.
Right, they want to own it, yeah. And with blockchain and with Bitcoin, you can't really do that. One of the, I think, implications of having a Bitcoin city and using blockchain is that one day somebody's going to ask, well, why don't we use blockchain to vote? Because there'd be a ledger, nobody could cheat, and everybody would know if someone voted or not. You know what I'm saying? And when we count the votes, there'd be no need to count the votes because they'd be counted automatically, and nobody could cheat, and everyone would have one vote. I don't know if Bukele is going to really like that.
I don't think so.
I mean, and this is kind of like the other side of the coin when it comes to, blockchain and so forth. I don't think he's really going to like that. I don't think a lot of people are going to like it when real estate, excuse me, starts coming up on the blockchain, starts getting recorded on the blockchain. Because we talked about this before about, like treasury, reapothecated treasuries where, you can have 10 billion in treasuries, you can loan it out 10 times, and be collecting interest on $100 billion, and you only have actually 10 billion in treasuries. As long as nobody ever wants their money, you can make a lot of money. And with collecting interest on 100 billion, you probably have enough to give them their money, and still, there'd be somebody else that want to get your treasuries, because what they would do is they would get 1 billion of your treasury and they would loan it out 10 times. So and that's something that's legal. It's done every day. And you brought up a good point. They also do it with gold, reapothecated gold.
Yep.
They'll have gold, That's why I used to always wonder, well, how much gold is it for Knox? What's really there? Is it really there? Is it really not? I don't think I'm a conspiracy theorist, but if they're reapothecated,
well, they certainly trade more futures than they have gold.
They can have 10 ounces of gold that they reapothecated 420 million times or something. We don't really know. But I guess that happens with the gold traders.
Yep.
When you buy gold, they don't actually have that gold. They might have some gold.
No.
And the reserve requirement and what it's called fractional lending, where they don't have to get 10% of what they have. I mean, they could you could have a company, I could have a company, we could have 10 billion in gold, we can loan out, I can loan out 90 billion to you, and you can loan out 80 billion to me. I can loan out some to this guy, I can loan out 70 billion to you, and we can keep this going and be collecting interest like you wouldn't believe.
Yeah. Well, look at, JP Morgan Chase, we talked about this before, but they paid a few $1 million in fines for manipulating precious metals prices using futures. And they ended up trading millions of futures on ounces of gold that don't exist on the planet. Right. And so here these banks are, and they attack fraud and like all these things. And every year they pay out these fines for explicit fraud, and market manipulation for themselves.
Guess who one of the biggest donors was to Trump, Obama, Clinton, and Bush? His initials are JD.
was
JP
it
Morgan Chase, Jamie
the
Dimon,
CEO? Yeah, Diamond. Yeah.
Jamie Dimon, and and he's one of the major donors. I mean, you talk about a bundler. When you're running for president, that's the first guy you call. You
Yeah.
know, and it's when capitalism and politics become married, it's kind of hard for them to get divorced.
Yeah. Yeah.
And with blockchain, with Bitcoin and blockchain, it kind of it may cause them to get divorced at some point.
Yeah, you another one who's been really vocal for some reason is Ken Griffith, or Griffin. What is it, Griffith? Griffin. Ken Griffin, Citadel, and he comes out like months ago. He came out. He spent $50 million fighting progressive tax measures in Chicago that would go to public service programs and things that would help people inject capital into emerging neighborhoods. He fought that with he spent $50 million.
Why?
Fighting progressive taxes that would directly help people. Then months later, clearly just as performance, also political performance, he said that he was thinking about moving Citadel headquarters out of Chicago because of the crime in the financial district. He felt unsafe. And I was like,
that's probably the only place there isn't crime. Right?
Imagine spending $50 million fighting, injecting capital into like neighborhoods that need it, and then complaining months later about feeling unsafe in the city that he's never been unsafe in. Like, I mean, it just blows your mind that these are the people running these companies, because Citadel is a company that makes money directly off the backs of people who, because they do market buys, they sell on the other side of market buys. So they buy the market buys from Robinhood, directly betting against all of the retail investors on Robinhood. So they sell on the back end of those. I mean, it's just like, Citadel pays billions every year in fines. But they make way more than that in what they do. And that's, that should be troubling to everybody.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Yeah. And he also was a vocal opponent of what El Salvador is doing. Because I think, I think they see down the road that things are going to have to be done a little more transparently and honestly, and a lot of things that they used to go probably not going to fly anymore.
Yeah.
And I think, what it's going to take is it's going to take, it's almost like, one day somebody from a big corporation is going to go all in on blockchain. And it's just like the floodgates are going to open.
Yeah.
And I think we can start seeing rumblings now when you have a country doing that, and then Ethiopia, Ethiopia declared that Cardano was the currency, was the cryptocurrency of the country of Ethiopia.
Yeah.
So you can use Cardano there apparently like you use dollars.
Right.
A lot of people have a lot invested in dollars and American dollars. So, this kind of upsets the apple cart. And that's why you're going to see a lot of pushback. But, when you see pushback from the Citadel guy and, the Bank of England, that probably is a pretty good indication. It's probably a good thing for most people.
Right. He's so petty too. He bought the Constitution that the Constitution DAO was trying to buy.
Yeah, to keep the guys from the decentralized autonomous organization.
Yeah.
Which is an organization on the blockchain composed of people who a DAO is a group of people who pool their resources and not pool their decision making, but they retain decision making power. And it's sort of like a corporation, but it's no hierarchical structure. It's a democratic corporation where everybody has a vote.
Right.
And he was so petty. They were going to buy the Constitution.
And he outbid them. I think just as like a move. I think he did it just as like a message,
Oh, well, that's all it was. Yeah, that's all it was. But hey, this is where we're at, and I think moving forward, blockchain and Bitcoin and decentralized finance is probably going to turn out to be the great equalizer.
Yeah, what's the plan?
Economics determines politics. And I think, from what we see with capitalism, that's every country in this world that says, China's, oh, we're communist, Russia's, oh yeah, we're communist, and this country, we're socialist, but I tell you what, they all practice capitalism.
Yeah.
Because that's the predominant economic system in the world right now.
Yeah.
So this is something new, decentralized finance, blockchain, Bitcoin, something new that people really aren't sure how it's going to turn out, except that people with money probably know that things will probably be a little more equitable, and people will have more of a say so. Like you can put your money in a bank at 0.1%, or you can buy Bitcoin and get 200% a year, or you can stake it in a liquidity pool and be almost guaranteed 30 to 40% a year, depending upon what you want to do. But it would be your choice. Right. And there wouldn't be this middleman. These banks make tons of money, and whenever it's funny because whenever you look at this list of Forbes, the 400 richest people, none of these guys are ever on that list. None of these people are ever on that list.
Right. Yeah. Where's it at? Yeah.
I mean, the Bank of England has been making money for, when did they get incorporated? Late 1600s or something. I mean, it's like ridiculous, the amount of money that they're making and do make. So, this is an entrenched economic system, and, blockchain is sort of a challenge to that, Bitcoin, blockchain, and people aren't really sure how it's going to benefit them.
Right.
It will probably, the robber barons won't be able to rob as much, but the guy that is on the low end of the scale, he'll probably come out a lot better.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because he'll have some decision-making ability on where and how he spends his or invests his money. Now, El Salvador is going to be a great case study on this.
Yeah.
And that's what I find really interesting, is this is the first time we'll get to see how this actually works and where the pitfalls are, because no country has done this, outside of the global banking system.
Well, it shows the ecosystem too. And I think that's what's really interesting. A lot of people think of cryptocurrencies really as just currencies or just stocks or something, right? Like people think of them as just this really static thing that maybe goes up and down and you trade it. But, the vision here shows the real potential for an entire ecosystem, for an entire infrastructure built on it, right? The same way that the internet works, where, you go to a store, everything's on the internet. You go shopping, whatever the case may be, you're doing business, you get a lift, you get you go
to swipe your card at the store and the internet's down, guess what?
Right. I have no idea if you even buy anything, right? Like, this is obviously the infrastructure underlying how our world works right now is electronic, right? It's digital. It's electronic at best, or at most, at the simplest level. And it's usually digital and it's usually online, right? And so what the future looks like in a decentralized way is having that same interconnectivity and that same online idea, but without any need for centralized servers or banks or institutions that manage those relationships.
For the chairman of the board and the president, and then the CEO, and then the CFO, and then executive vice president, then the senior vice president, then the vice president.
Right.
All your money is going to paying these people.
Right.
When you get 0.2% on your savings, that 15 or 20% that they're making is going to pay all these people.
Exactly. Yeah. So, you look at every, just to process a medical bill, right? There's, you've got 40 different middlemen that are involved. You get bills from companies you've never heard of. I've gotten bills from companies that look like scam bills, but it was like somewhat, it was somehow indirectly related to something that I got at the hospital, right? Like, it doesn't make any sense, right? Why would you need, and they're all getting paid in the middle. And so, when you look at a city that is built on infrastructure and powered by green renewable energy, and then it's generating from that energy, it's generating wealth and income that you could potentially, I don't know if he'll do this, but then you really could have a bottom-up economy that the people actually own. And that's the real potential here, because the internet obviously did amazing things for how we connect to each other. Like right now, I mean, it did really amazing things in how we shop and do business and communicate and organize, but we still rely on all the stuff in the middle. And when you remove all of that and you have a city that not just technologically is decentralized, but is economically decentralized, then that's a whole other chapter for society. And that's going to be really interesting to see.
Right. And a lot of times, we talked about this before about the internet. I remember when there was no internet. I remember in the early 80s, a buddy of mine worked at IBM, and he was like, he used to have $700-800 a month phone bills from the internet, because back then everything was by the minute. There was no $40 a month unlimited, And so he got me interested in the internet, and it was just like this place where you could go and you could find all this stuff that people posted, Like I was working at a company, I would say, I want to see how much I'm making. And I said, I wonder if anybody posted with the salaries. And sure enough, there were the salaries of everybody in the company. So it was things like that, but the functionality didn't come until later on. And I kind of feel like, blockchain is kind of like that. We kind of understand we're using it for Bitcoin, but the true functionality and decentralized finance, is going to kind of come later on, and it's probably going to come in a lot of ways, that we can't really envision right now.
Right.
My daughter asked me, she said, well, what will a decentralized metaverse look like? I'm like, I'll ask Alex and get back to you.
Yeah, it's cool. Like I have friends who just hosted like an event in the metaverse, and they're like an electronic music group called Autograph from Chicago originally. And they held a metaverse event. We have like an art studio here in Chicago called Imno Art, and they did a virtual event in Decentraland. They dropped clothing, virtual clothing, and had like an event together where they performed and stuff all virtually, which is pretty powerful. I mean, people,
3D, how about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible, right? And that's, that's just right now when the stuff is like brand new, right? There's people enjoying it and encountering it. And I think, obviously we're seeing other use cases of blockchain. Obviously we've seen NFTs. Unfortunately, a lot of people think of NFTs as like just the Bored Ape kind of like cartoon generative art thing, but there are real artists, not just like the generative get rich quick stuff, but there's real artists like my cousin who have been able to sell their art. My cousin's been an artist. He's an art teacher. He's never really had a great platform for like actually creating community around his art and distributing it in really great ways. And now I can't even, when he does drops of his NFTs, they sell out like that because he's created a whole community of people who like love his style and love his like different categories that he does. And like, I can't even compete. Like I can't even go in there and get one because people love it so much. And
now he does digital art.
He's like a real art, like he does like real art too. So his NFTs are digital, but like for example, he did a raffle today, I think, where whoever won the raffle was sent like the hand drawn, like the original piece too.
But you could make a work of art into a digital piece too, right? I mean,
yeah, and I think where people too, where there's kind of a disconnect in knowledge, a lot of people think of NFTs as the asset, right? Which isn't true. It's NFTs are not the image or the song or the video or whatever, you know, the 3D file or whatever it is. NFTs are it's the record, right? It's the record of ownership. It's the tokenization of your ownership. So you think of like a deed to a house, the deed to the house is not the house, right? It's just a really important document of like who owns the house. Now you think about this silly piece of paper and, you know, it gets crumpled up in the back of a, you know, filing cabinet somewhere in some government office where people are paid $30K a year to watch it. And it, you know, that's like not a great system. People die, they end up with like major conflicts over deeds. Where did deed go? Who has the deed now? Like, I mean, it's just a convoluted, expensive process. And record of ownership and defending that record of ownership and having immutable record of who owns things is a very serious problem in our society that we haven't really solved in a great way yet. And so things like NFTs, where you're able to tokenize that ownership and that way have it liquid in a broader economy, as well as being highly verifiable and secure in the process, and transparent. Whoa, like the potential there is huge. Of all of the different things in our lives, you think about our lives are essentially constructed of two types of things. Fungible things, you know, like, I don't know, maybe the pen, right? You're going to have a box of 10 pens. Those are pretty fungible. You don't have one pen out of there that's like, that's a different pen than the other pens, right? Everything in our lives are either fungible, the things that are just like any other thing, just like it, they're replaceable. And then you have things that are non-fungible, right? Like, you know, like art or like, you know, things that are not replaceable. And your citizenship, votes, right? Everything that we do and have can be kind of fit into one of those two categories. Now, people have no problem imagining fungible assets, right? Dollars, all that stuff. But this idea of being able to incorporate non-fungible things into the economy in a really digital liquid way, that's pretty novel because previously those things weren't that easily integrated, right? People understood culture value of art and artifacts and things. So that concept's there for human beings, but other than like the David Bowie bonds from 1997 or whatever year it was, we haven't had a lot of great success in like incorporating those things in a really liquid or tokenized way in the economy. They've had values in the economy.
And you could have a non-fungible token in a metaverse that was an experience, right? You know, like, you know, Paul McCartney wants to hang out with you in the studio for an hour. Yeah, you know, it's 150 grand. Yeah. Well, you know what? It just went up to 2 million because I bought them all. You know? Exactly. Yeah. But I'm saying that it could be an experience. You know, it could be an experience in the metaverse. Yeah, ticketing for events, you know, all sorts of things. Yeah. So your own the actual recording of that, like for example, let's say you meet with a psychologist, you have a therapist or something, and you meet with them, and over time you have NFTs of each of those visits that I think can then be like incorporated into some story of like your progress that like your therapist can decide who has access to. Maybe there's another therapist that wants sharing of medical records. Like there's all sorts of things that can be tokenized and then stored as NFTs that, you know, end up really secure and properly owned, but also extremely liquid and powerful in whatever context you want to use them or analyze them or combine them into you could have an NFT that has a bunch of sub NFTs that are like all of your experiences related to something. And you could, and the value would be whatever someone decides it was worth. Even if it may not be valuable. Yeah, it may not be valuable to anybody. It may just be an experience you want to share, or it could be, you know, a picture that you digitized. You know, like somebody gave me this card the other day. They said, "Oh, I got a great card for you. You know, I know you like basketball. It's Allen Iverson, and there's a piece of his trunks that they cut off and put in a card." Now, he said, "This is really valuable." Well, not to me, you know what I'm saying? But to somebody, you know, things are worth whatever the perceived value is. And I think
Right.
with NFTs, is an NFT, and I guess what determines the value of an NFT is what somebody paid for it the last time,
Or the context, right?
or the
Like if your
context.
medical records an NFT, it's valuable because of its intrinsic use, right? It's not valuable perhaps in a monetary sense. It's valuable because you need to own it. Your doctors need to have access to it. It can be transferable from doctor to doctor, system to system. It's not locked up in some hospital system somewhere that you have to, that's sort of the power of this, is like they're valuable really based on context where they're useful. So there's a lot of potential there.
Right. And I think the whole, and kind of all these things are going to kind of work together one day. The NFTs, the metaverse,
Right.
the blockchain, and I think who's ever has the vision to sort of kind of see where this is going is where a lot of the opportunities for money making opportunities come in.
It could be Bukele, right? There's already enough there to create that ecosystem in terms of concept.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be, right? It could be in a smaller scale somewhere, but people are going to be generating entire ecosystems around this, right? And it's not just going to be, we're going to see more and more of that interconnectivity of how everything works together.
Yeah, we are. And there's some things that have to be worked out. There has to be some sort of regulation,
right?
So that the United States and the Bank of England can get together and say we're going to buy up all the Bitcoin. So I'm sure there'll have to be some sort of limits on how involved the government can be, and I guess that can just be written into the smart contract. Right. So they won't be able to sort of corner the market. That's the latest thing. They want to corner the market.
Right.
I guess China has their own cryptocurrency that they would prefer you use
right.
rather than Bitcoin. Yeah. So well, this has been an interesting discussion. We hope that we've shown you some of the practical uses for decentralized finance ideas, and metaverse, and Bitcoin and blockchain. It's more than just blockchain is more than just cryptocurrency. We talked about the voting. That's a big one I see. When voting is on the blockchain and everybody has one vote and everybody will know, they can vote, and you can't buy votes from people. You can't duplicate votes. You can't miscount votes. So that's one application. That's one application. Now, I don't know if El Salvador will go that far, but I think, blockchain, a lot of these decentralized finance ideas, have applications that we're probably not even aware of with the internet. I mean, it's crazy now what you can do with the internet. It's just, you can talk to a guy on the moon. I mean, come on, man. That's crazy.
You could be on the moon right now, and we wouldn't even know.
When you wouldn't even know it. Yeah. So, this is going to be a next this, and I would tell, I was talking to a young lady the other day, and she said, "Well, I'm not really sure." She's like 11th grade. I'm not really sure what I'm majoring in. She said, "If you were me, what would you major in?" I said, "Man, I would major in coding." I'd say data scientist. I said, that's what I would do if I was coming along now. I said, because that's the way things are going. And, it used to be the haves and have-nots was about money, but I think moving forward is going to be about knowledge, and if you're not astute technically, if you're not, majoring in medicine or advanced accounting or law or something, there's, you could see it happening already. I mean, CPAs are making a couple $100,000 a year, and teachers are starting out at 34, and they both may have master's degrees, but it's almost like, it's going to be to separate the haves and the have-nots are going to be what more so than how much your dad left you,
Right.
So
yeah,
I think it's going to be interesting coming along, and I would encourage all young people, man, just to learn how to code, because that's just where we're at.
And it shows that you do better in everything else when you know how to code. Even if you don't end up being a coder, your language skills, communication skills, finance, managing finances.
Well, I think it's sort of like, to me, it's sort of like, geometry. It teaches you to think logically.
Right.
Or, when I remember knowing algebra, in geometry, when you're doing systems of equations, you have to do this before you can do that, and blah, 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 blah. You solve for X and Y and then Z, and then, and I think what it does, is coding teaches you to think, logically. And like you say, it has applications beyond just coding,
Right.
so it's kind of rewires the brain, to think a certain way, which is good. So, yeah. Well, anything you want to say in closing, Alex?
No, this is good. Yeah,
Okay.
good case study that we'll have to keep an eye on.
Yeah, really, really. Well, we want to thank you. And, this is Robert Vaughn, Alex Jewell for DeFi Collective. You can find us on YouTube at the DeFi Collective, also at Let's Talk Radio. But like us and share us, follow us, subscribe. We have quite a few shows, and we cover many, many different things having to do with DeFi, crypto, and blockchain. So if there's something that you would like to hear, like if you want to know more about the metaverse, that was real popular. We have got a lot of feedback. So maybe we'll go do a little deep dive in that one. I mean, please let us know. But again, our time is up, but we want to thank you for yours. So until next week, have a great week and make some money. Do something good, wear your mask, I guess.
Yes.
All right. We'll see you. Good night.
Okay.